All right, I'm going to go ahead. I'm the graduate coordinator for the Department of Finance here at McCombs. I handle all the administrative tasks for our PhD program. And with me are Pratik Mahajan, Kevin May, and Lydia Fu, three of our current PhD students. And I will let them introduce themselves real quick. Pratik, you want to go?
Sure. I'm Pratik Mahajan. I'm a third year PhD student. I also went to UT for undergrad. I was a business finance and engineering major. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about why you should be interested in a PhD program, and especially at UT, considering at least a couple of you are also doing your undergrad degree here at UT.
Kevin?
Yeah, hi, my name is Kevin May. I'm in the same year as Pratik, also in the PhD program in finance. I also went to UT for my undergrad. I graduated from UT in 2015, and so that was quite a bit ago. And then between graduating from UT and starting the PhD program, I worked for 5 years in management consulting. So I have a little bit of experience of thinking that the thought process of going into industry versus coming to academia. And obviously, I ended up choosing to come to academia instead. And so I'm really happy to talk more about that process too.
Hi, I'm Lydia. I'm a fourth year finance PhD student. I went to college in Claremont McKenna, in California. I worked for about a year before I started in a PhD program here, but basically I applied straight out of college in like September, October-ish. So yeah, I probably can't talk too much about industry experience, but if you're interested in that, I could also talk more about it.
I also wanted to see if you guys would talk a little bit about like your research and what you've been doing with the faculty here, which faculty you've been working with, that kind of a thing.
Sure. So I did a paper my second year with John Griffin and Sam Kruger, who are two professors here, looking at the Paycheck Protection Program, which was a large government relief program that the US government did at the beginning of COVID, and then for the year and a half after. And we basically looked at fraud that was in it and basically trying to quantify it in various ways. And now I'm working on a second paper that's somewhat of a follow-up to that first paper that looks at the kind of larger macroeconomic impacts that that fraud might have had on different asset prices. So the one that we're kind of focusing on is housing prices. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about that research. And it's just been great working with some of the finance professors here. Almost everybody kind of is, it's probably one of the largest like involvement between like faculty and like PhD students across a lot of the different programs that I applied to, which was one of the other reasons that I was kind of drawn to UT. And the faculty are very receptive to working with you and kind of working on different projects, taking your ideas in and trying to figure out how they can kind of incorporate it into things that they're working on or kind of like further the research interests that you have.
Yeah, I can first add on to that process and then also the papers that I'm working on. But just similarly to what Pratik was saying, like I found that faculty have been extremely supportive. One of the great things is that we have a lot of different faculty members with very many different interests, and so it's easy to find someone who's a true expert in the field, has a deep thinker and like has high caliber expertise, but also can help connect you with different other people in their network. And then this is across many different fields also within finance. So I think that's been really helpful in helping get started and exploring different topics. So for me, I was paired with helping support a Professor Mike Sawkin. And then through that process and working with him on different projects, I ended up being a co-author on one of kind of a paper that we were working on together that's about cryptocurrencies, and it's more of a theory paper, a little bit more math heavy, which is not necessarily something I thought I would be doing when I first started, but then I ended up learning a lot through the process of working with him and feeling like it's something I have a really strong interest in going forward, which is the theory part of it, that is. And so the paper is about cryptocurrencies and whether speculators are crowding out normal investors that really want to use the technology for its intended purpose. Part of the idea is that in a lot of financial markets, you imagine that speculators help define, help do like price discovery and help the markets clear to make sure that we are pricing assets correctly. We show that if this asset also has a usage as opposed to just being a security that's claimed to some sort of cash flows, then it ends up being that speculators can crowd out users that want to use it for its intended purpose. So that's a theory paper that we've worked on. And then I'm right now working on a second paper that's a empirical side that's going to show some of the findings that we have and prove it out in the data also. So that's kind of been my process in kind of exploring an idea and then bringing it on to like some of its natural follow-on conclusions.
I guess I'll try to add on to a lot of good points already made here. So one thing I would say, and I can also talk about my own research. One thing I would say is I think it's very helpful when we first came in, at least, that we got paired up with professors based on maybe what our coordinators think that our interest would be. And then you can also switch to working with different professors during the course of your PhD program if it turned out to not be a good fit or you turned out to have different academic interests. So I got pretty lucky. I think I got paired up with Professor Jonathan Cohen my first year. And so I'm currently also working with him on a project regarding venture capital. It's a relatively early stage program, so I can talk about sort of how my personal interest evolved as well in conjunction with working with Jonathan. So he's basically, Jonathan is my first year summer paper advisor. And so I started to be interested in private equity when I was sort of starting to think about research topics. So I wrote a first year paper on the effect of private equity acquisitions on US hospital outcomes. So that's sort of how the interest started in the first paper. And subsequently, so with also guidance from Professor Cohen, I also started to work on sort of a slightly different focus on venture capital and how the network of venture capital investors can affect the choices they make on their investments and subsequently the returns. And for my personal research, I am currently working on you're sort of using regulatory filing disclosures of private equity funds and how the insider investments actually make a difference in how the funds sort of exited investments and how that affects maybe their ultimate returns. No, and
I wanted to say, if the two viewers that we have right now that are here in the meeting, if you guys want to ask questions as we go, that is more than fine. Feel free to stop any of us and ask questions of our students. And if you don't have any questions, then I would actually like to move on to what the admissions process was like for you guys. But I'll wait and give them both a second if they have any questions.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, this is Ashutosh. I'm a current master's student in quantitative finance and economics in Texas State University. I'm in my third semester. I'll be graduating next spring. So I have planned to apply UT Austin for next fall 2023. I think at first, please you go through the admission process. Then I can ask you questions about that after knowing about you.
I have a question for Pratik. Like, I have a similar research interest as the work that you're doing right now, like intersection between macroeconomics and finance. So, like, what if, because I had a discussion with professors yesterday and I asked the same question with them. So, because in finance PhD, there are professors who are doing macro finance, and also there is economics PhD, and there is a subfield within economics PhD where they offer finance. So, like, I'm confused, like, what would be the difference, and where should I apply for? Because my interest is that macro finance.
I mean, I think there's room for you to do it in either an econ program or a finance program. But I think the finance program is a little bit more interested in how like financial markets play a role in like the macroeconomy versus like the econ side of it would be more interested in how like production plays a role or like other aspects of the economy play a role. So I think it really comes down to whether you're interested in figuring out how the financial system impacts that aspect of how the economy is working. But I definitely think and would recommend that you apply to a variety of both finance and econ programs because for one, some universities only have one or the other. So I think you should cast a wide net. But I think for what you're specifically interested in, I think a finance program would be more interesting if you want to kind of really study how the financial system is impacting it.
And I can add to that too. I know that the first 2 years of our program here are very econ course heavy. And after the first 2 years, you do have the option to take on electives, and many of our students take on econ electives per their research interests.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to that a little bit. I think like within the profession, finance is sometimes seen as like a subfield within econ. And so as we get into like macro finance, like a lot of the research does commingle and people do move between kind of go to the same conferences. And so it kind of on the back end, it ends up being the same. And so both of them, you can kind of work in macro finance coming from econ or finance. I know within our department, we do have one or two, like multiple professors that end up doing macro finance. And so it's definitely viable.
Thank you.
If you guys would like to go ahead and start talking about like what the admissions process was like for you, and go from there.
So yeah, I can start. I applied to about like 15 different places, mostly finance programs, because I already knew that I was kind of interested in kind of understanding how financial system plays a role. In particular, when I applied, I was interested in how technology could play a role in like helping people get access to more financial markets in like developing markets and whatnot. So I already kind of knew what I was interested in. I didn't end up really doing research there, but I'm still really interested in the finance aspect of it more than like the econ aspect of it. So that's why I ended up applying to finance programs. So once you apply, then basically within say like a couple of months, you'll start getting some like interview requests and you go through them and
You're muted.
Specifically, the way that I worked at UT was we submitted our applications, and about a month and a half later, we had interviews with the PhD coordinator, from the graduate advisor that we had back then, who has recently changed over to another professor. But it was a relatively at least in my case, a relatively like informal interview process the first time to just kind of see if it would be a good fit. I think in particular that it was a bit different for me because I was already at UT, so I already kind of knew a lot of the faculty coming in. But I think in general, they kind of just want to understand whether you would be a good fit here, whether the people that are kind of here as professors are kind of fit with what at least you think your current research interests would be, and if you would be like a good fit for how the general culture is here. So it's kind of a back and forth of trying to see if you're a good fit, if the university is a good fit. So in general, that's what they're interested in. But yeah, I'm happy to comment about any specific aspects of it that you have questions about.
Yeah, and then I can go next. I think Pratik already covered a lot of the important logistical details. I think my personal experience is I also applied to about 15 to 20 schools. I also mostly applied to finance programs. I came in thinking that I wanted to do financial intermediation or banking topics. That's still something that I'm very interested in. And so I kind of wrote that into my personal statement. And then as you go and apply to different programs, it's really important to look at the faculty members there and kind of think about like who you might want to work with or what kind of topics really match with the interest that you have, and then weaving that into the whole overall package. And then the rest of it, I think Pratik already captured a lot of my personal experience. So yeah.
I guess I'll try to add on to it. I also applied to I think I applied to 17 schools. I applied only to finance programs. In my case, I was actually advised by one of my undergrad professors that finance program would be a good fit for me based on my academic interest. And I think for me, because I was working while I was applying to here, the process is sort of more sort of sporadic. So you have to submit the application by the deadline, and then you sort of wait a month or two, and then you get on the phone interview. And then once you were given the offer, I was also offered the opportunity to visit campus because I've never been to Texas before I got an offer here. So I went on a campus visit, and actually I got multiple offers. So I went to all the both of the schools that I got accepted to, and then sort of tried to make a comparison and make a decision based on more information. So they also make you talk to multiple professors if you ever go on a campus visit. So that's also very helpful at the end. I also just want to add that like in your personal statement, for example, your academic interest doesn't have to be, what you end up doing at UT. And I remember very vividly that I put in market microstructure and asset pricing in my personal statement. And, that turned out to not be the case. And that's completely okay. And you just pretty much have to say what you're currently passionate about and why you're interested in it. And that should be good enough.
Any questions after all that?
I have questions. So, like, how much math do they look for?
I could try to answer this. I think so. I think GRE still requires math section, so you at least have to do that. But in terms of preparation, like obviously, having a lot of math background is helpful for your coursework in the first 2 years. So even if it's not required for admission, it is still an important factor in just how good your life would be in the first 2 years. So it's always recommended to take as much as possible in undergrad. In terms of getting into the program, I have a math major in undergrad, so I think that might have helped, at least in providing like an evidence that at least I know enough about math, but I don't think it's a hard requirement. And we have students who come in with relatively little math background in undergrad and still became a successful, PhD student. So it's definitely not a must, but I can say that for the first 2 years, it will make your life a bit easier if you know more math. Yeah.
I will add to that, for newly admitted PhD students, for about 3 weeks before the fall semester begins, you are enrolled in a math boot camp through the econ department to kind of, it's a jumping point for all the coursework that you'll be doing over the next 2 years. So
I have a question for the 3 PhD student here. What is the recommended GRE score? I have this is my second master's. I have a master's in applied mathematics, and my undergrad also was in mathematics. I have few years experience in banking industry. So will the admission committee consider all of this, or they will consider me based on my only the GRE score?
I mean, I think it's a relatively holistic process, but I don't think they're going to completely weed you out if you have like a relatively like score or anything like that. I think in practice, the GRE scores are pretty high, but I don't think it's a completely requirement.
I wanted to add too that we typically request or the general for all of our students currently, the GRE quant scores are in the 95th percentile. That's kind of an average of what we go by. And our department and the accounting department both still require the GRE or GMAT. I know some other departments and schools within UT are waiving, but we are not waiving. And so that's something to think about as well.
Thank you.
I have a question. So in the statement of purpose, what should I highlight the most? Like my interest or like what I want to do? Or like, yeah, what would they look for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not on the admissions committee, so we can't really say like exactly like what are the criteria. But my sense from talking to students that have come through and students that have visited the campus as they were candidates is that I think talking about your research interests matters a lot, and thinking a lot about like what expertise you might bring into the program, I think is helpful also. So I think those are kind of the places where you want to really anchor your personal statements. I know when I was applying, I had a lot of work experience before, and I think I wrote a lot about like the different skills that I thought I had and kind of why I thought my work experience would be relevant. And I think of those parts, the stuff that was the most useful signal for committees was probably the parts about kind of how my experience would help motivate research questions and give details and understandings about how different market institutions work. But whether or not like knowing how to work really well in a team and like knowing about a time that I like kind of how to convince someone or something, or some of those like those types of questions, I don't think I think those are secondary to really speaking as much as you can about your research interests. And I welcome other people to correct me if you've had some different experiences.
Coming from my perspective, that is accurate. They are looking for a clear rationale of research. It doesn't have to be, like Lydia mentioned, it doesn't have to be where you will stay, but they want to see that you have some really clear ideas of where you think you might want to go.
Yeah, and then I know Lydia already said that she didn't really stick with the things that she wrote in her research interest statement, and so that was my case also. I think I've kind of explored a lot, and I definitely, looking back, I think my research interests weren't as well defined or what I thought I was writing down. I think over time you realize like some of those things make some more sense or some less sense, but I think in general trying to make a statement about what you're interested in is important.
I know we have another guest that arrived, and if there's any questions that myself, the graduate coordinator, or one of our PhD students can answer for you about applying to the PhD program or anything, you just feel free to hop in.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please do.
Awesome. So what do y'all like best about being at UT Austin as opposed to, well, I'll just start with that. What do you like most about being at UT Austin?
I mean, I think the faculty are the best part. They're extremely willing to like work with you about like various ideas that you have, even if it's not a fully flushed out idea. If you just want to bounce something by them to make sure that how you're thinking about it is like reasonable, they're extremely open to doing that. And then more importantly, when you have like a somewhat more fleshed out idea, they're willing to like work with you to actually like create a full out paper with it, either as like a co-author or to like help you in your dissertation research so that you can create your like kind of what you're going to be using as your job market paper to get your first academic job. They're extremely open to like working with you. I think that's the best part.
Awesome.
I can go
Go ahead.
next. I think Austin is just a really conducive place to have camaraderie and grow camaraderie among the program in general, just both on campus when we have different seminars and having our offices together, and everyone basically comes on campus and we get a chat and talk about, research ideas and go out and to have lunch and just catch up kind of basically every day. It's just been a really great vibe, I think. And so I think that's been really great on campus. And then off campus, like, of course, after we have Friday seminars, we can always go off campus, like catch up more and hang out. And there's always, a variety of things to do. There's always great speakers coming in from out of town. I think people like to visit UT a lot. And so that's important for your development as an academic. But also like friends like to come through Austin for different personal commitments that they might have. And so in general, I think Austin's just a great nexus to make a lot of connections, both professionally and personally. And I think it's a great time to kind of spend your mid-20s or coming up on 30 in Austin. So I think all of that's been really great.
I'm starting to realize that going last on every single question is not a great idea. Okay, I can try to come up with a different answer. Well, so I'll be more specific. So I agree with Kevin that the research environment is very good and faculties are very willing to sort of share their debate with PhD students. And on Fridays, for example, in our PhD seminar, we can always sort of have multiple faculties in the meeting and as well as on the Wednesday pre-seminar meetings for the PhD students only, we always have a very vibrant discussion about ongoing academic debates. And you can learn a lot from senior faculties who are very willing to just talk to students directly and share their opinion. So I think it's a very good primer on what academia is like, sort of once you start working there and be a participant of these discussions and academic debates. I think that has helped me a lot in sort of forming an understanding of how the whole thing works and how you should think about research topics in general. And that sort of down the line will help you save a lot of time when you get stuck on maybe things that are not, research topics that are not ideal or may not be, worth pursuing, and all sorts of more practical issues that faculties can help with.
Yeah, maybe to pile onto that and really drive the point home, I think my favorite thing of the whole year is the Texas Finance Festival, where really high caliber researchers from around the country and from around their profession come in and present at the seminar or this conference for 2 days. It's a 2-day conference here at UT. I think the great thing about that conference is that it's more junior faculty members from really high caliber schools come in and present, and then they have senior faculty members come and give discussion on these papers. And so as a PhD student here, it's really easy to attend this conference, see great projects that are kind of work in progress, to see how that's kind of shaped and molded. And then in the evenings, there's dinner, and it's just a great chance to meet some different people in different parts of the profession, in different parts of their careers, and also to catch up with, again, just with the cohort and with the program in general. So I think that's always one thing that I always really look forward to, that captures a lot of what I enjoy about the program.
Wonderful, thank you. I do have one other question too. So you all could have chosen to go to any other school. What was it about UT Austin that really stood out to you that made you want to choose to go there? I know this may kind of coincide with the question I asked before, but what is it like that really said, I need to be here?
Should I go first this time? Okay. Well, first, I just want to say that finance PhD admissions are very competitive. So even if you might have, higher aspirations, you may not end up with always, a lot of offers. So in my case, I really only had to decide between 2 schools. So in general, I think UT is, there's a lot of, academic things to consider. UT is a big department, so we have a lot of variety. So like I said, I obviously changed my academic interest, but it's not as big of a problem if you go to a bigger department and they have all sorts of different faculties that you could work with. So that's one big advantage. Not to like hedge, but definitely is one thing to consider. If you go to a smaller department, you may not have a lot of options around to work with faculty and related research fields. And another thing is not really related to academics. It's more like, is Austin a good place to live for like the next 6 years, which I think is very important. And so I think out of all my choices, Austin is a relatively more livable city. And well, it was way less expensive when I first moved here, but it is still a very livable city for sure.
I can go next, and then Pratik can go last, I guess, the hardest one. I think what Lydia said is all true, and I would echo a lot of the points that she made. Maybe I think adding 2 more points. I think one is, again, the personal reason. Like, I think if you're gonna spend your, mid-20s or whatever, like if you're gonna spend 5 years in a place, I think it's important to like enjoy living there. I think Austin is a very livable city, and there's always like easy ways to get, to enjoy your time if you want to take a break. But if you want to fly out, it's also easy to fly to places from Austin. And just people, I think, are excited to live in Austin. So I think that's definitely a factor. The most important factor, I think, is research interest. So I also did enjoy like the professors that I talked to and like hearing about how they thought about the world and the topics that they cared about. I think was really important for me also. And so that alignment helped really make that decision for me.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay. Do you need to contact with the faculty members before actually applying to the program? Is it required that I have to actually manage a professor and bring my interest to the professor?
We actually request that prospective applicants not contact the faculty because a lot of our faculty are involved with the admissions committee. And so they're kind of getting an idea of who you are based on your application package already. And then when you arrive, our graduate advisor, Professor William Fuchs, he kind of pairs people based on research alignments and stuff like that. And then obviously personalities come into play as well. But like Lydia mentioned earlier, you can change who your research supervisor is at the beginning of any semester, kind of a thing, if you think personalities aren't meshing or the research alignments just aren't there, stuff like that.
Yeah. Maybe to add on to that, I think it doesn't have to be a super rigid process if you want to change per semester also. Like, I think for me, I've been talking to a lot of different faculty members throughout the year, and just kind of dropping by, saying hi, telling them what I'm working on. And it's kind of just more general, and people have been really eager to like talk to me about my ideas and like kick them around and tell me like where else I should be digging more, what kind of reading I should be doing. And so I think there's a lot of just fluid exchange of ideas here that really helps make it easy to kind of grow your interests regardless. But as you're exploring different faculty members, I think it is useful to like go to their websites and see the papers that they work on, and that will help give you a sense of kind of what the research here is like. I think you'll find that it's of extremely high quality and extremely diverse, and so there should be definitely someone that will fit your interests.
I have another question, kind of piggybacking off of that. I know I want to get a PhD in finance, but I haven't quite narrowed down what I want to do research in. Do you have to know what you want to do before you actually, apply? Or like, how did y'all figure out what you're doing your research or your dissertation on?
So
Hey, Pratik, the sound is pretty
to the
choppy.
question up front, I actually find 1 second.
Yeah, maybe I can go, and then Prachi can pile in. I think I was in a very similar boat where I knew generally that I had an interest in learning about like banks and how people get mortgages and thinking about like different types of financial decisions that households make. And I knew that was my interest generally, and I could write about that in a general sense. And I, um, you know, you talked about like, oh, how do you know like how to decide on a thesis? Like that's actually a question I'm still asking professors to this day. And so I think a lot of us are really undecided and still exploring it. And I think that's okay, and it's just part of the process and part of growing as a researcher is like feeling out where these questions are and getting an understanding of where the field is on these different types of questions. As you're applying, I know for me personally, I didn't have the sharpest research question. Like I didn't know what the cutting edge was, but I knew like generally that I had a strong interest in a few specific topics, and I can like point to some news or point to some specific things that I learned in school. I was like, okay, I know that this topic exists. Like I know a little bit about, hey, when you do banking and giving mortgages, there's a lot of things about like assessing risks and like thinking about like what do mortgages and mortgage applicants kind of what are their profiles and like how is there disparity across different geographies. And I can speak to a little bit of that. And then as I was applying, I would try to read a little bit more about that kind of in the news, but particularly like also through just like Google Scholars, skimming some different things. I think you can kind of get a flavor for what the research looks like. And then as I wrote it into my research interests, I think looking back now, it could have definitely been a lot sharper, but I'm still here and I think that's okay. Does that help answer the question? I'm happy to go further into it.
Absolutely, because yeah, I think we got a connection here. Because it's like I know I love stocks and options. I actually trade them, but I just have a passion for it, and I want to learn, like, be a master of that, and more in investments. So, I mean, I don't know really right now what the research would be, for that topic or that area, but I know I'm very passionate about it and I do want to, learn more. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think UT would be a great place for that. We have a lot of faculty members that made huge contributions to the fields of investments generally. Um, and so I think there'd be a lot of different ways to learn about it. I think now is also a really interesting time thinking about like retail traders and how they impact stocks and how they kind of show up in different places and explain different portfolios and different types of returns. All of that stuff, I think, are things that you could write into a research statement and thinking about kind of what is it about the stock market or the options market that interests you and kind of the things that you find puzzling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are all great ideas. Thank you.
yeah, of course.
It's definitely something worth mentioning too. I mean, because we were discussing the personal statements earlier, and I think it is something to try to convey in a personal statement what your passion is and how passionate you are. And I think you can for sure do that.
I certainly will. These are all great pointers. I appreciate y'all.
I have one question for the 3 PhD student. Do you know about any research areas or research option in the UT Austin with any professor on behavioral finance, especially the text analysis of natural language processing in finance industry? Actually, currently I'm doing a research. I'm working on a research paper with my professor on text analysis of all Form 10K of all US companies and counting the positive and negative words and fog index and find the relationship between with the stock returns, how they actually influence those stock returns. Actually, I went through the professors and I didn't find that. Do you know about that? Especially.
Yeah,
Are you looking for one of our faculty pages?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we do have people that are interested in these topics. Like I know that, we would call that like empirical asset pricing, kind of explaining stock returns. I think Travis Johnson is a professor that's really good at doing a lot of these different types of tests. And as like, if you were to bounce ideas with him, he would help really guide your research and like kind of the shapes of what the field looks like and how to run tests in a way that make these conclusions really pop. And I think that's definitely one place you could look. I know that
Is the
also
professor again? Please, I couldn't hear you.
Travis Johnson.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then also Sheridan Tippman, who's currently the department chair, he's made huge contributions to the field. And he's been a big part of debunking like kind of the efficient markets hypothesis and what really counts as efficient markets. And so he's just a giant in the field. And so these types of ideas about like behavioral finance and what really moves stock returns, he knows that stuff like inside out, upside down, like more so than almost anyone. And so I think there's definitely people here that could help, continue to work down that research program that you're talking about, kind of the intersection of behavioral finance and markets.
I think one more thing to add, the McCombs School also has great departments in like IROM and a lot of other kind of faculty members that not even in just the finance department, but outside, like more broadly, are looking at similar topics. And I think there's a good amount of collaboration that goes on between these departments. So I think not just looking at the finance faculty, but some of them more broadly, I think you would find many people there looking at very similar things to what you're interested in.
I will say too that many of our graduating students have actually had faculty from other departments like marketing or IROM, like you mentioned, on their dissertation committees. And we even have some faculty from the econ department that a lot of our PhD students may work with that will be on their dissertation committee. So there is so much collaboration here.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm a little late. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it. We're just kind of doing like a Q&A. If anybody has any questions that pop up, we're going for it now.
Sorry. So will the financial PhD program have some like empirical experience with securities company, fund companies, consulting companies, such kind of a learning opportunity in our PhD program?
Yeah, maybe I can speak to that a little bit. So I came out of a consulting company, came into the PhD. I think the work is similar, but also there's like some important like differences that I think are also very interesting. But definitely, I think the empirical side is a huge part of the PhD. I think most of our students do empirical work, as I think that was, if I'm understanding the question correctly. And so as we do empirical work, there's a lot of research that's goes into like explaining stock returns and thinking about how investment companies make decisions, both kind of mutual funds, but also I know Lydia does work in different types of institutional investors. She was talking about that a little bit earlier, like private equity firms or venture capital firms. And so I think there's a lot of empirical work that goes into that and understanding kind of some of those behaviors. Maybe I'll leave it there if Lydia or Pratik want to chime in.
Okay, let me try. I think we don't have like regularly structured programming on like summer internships or anything, if that's what you're talking about. But the day-to-day research for most empirically oriented students do involve in a lot of similar tasks. So your data analytics skills are very important, and you learn a lot by working with a lot of interesting data. And that's also, part of the reason why I enjoyed being a PhD student is you get to work with all kinds of interesting data. And, whether or not you can write a paper out of it is a different story, but you get to work with a lot of data and you get to play with them. And obviously industry is an option after you graduate, and you can apply to industry jobs from our programs. But obviously a lot of the PhD students here are more interested in sort of doing academic research and going into academia. So that definitely is something that you should consider sort of weigh on before you apply to PhD program is how much do you actually want to be in academia versus just sort of getting industry experience at, you know, a regular job.
Yeah, thank you. So what kind of programming skills do you use frequently?
So I think just general data analysis skills and like knowing how to basically use, like, I think a lot of us use like Python for the majority of our data analysis. But I think as much of it coming in, it will make your life easier. But there are several students that came in with relatively little programming experience, and they get through the program. It's just you need to put in the time and effort your first couple of get a handle of it and figure out how you can kind of learn quickly. But I think it's a great spot to kind of learn it, especially because a lot of the PhD students do have experience, and it's very collaborative, and people are willing to kind of help you learn and about how you would do various things. But yeah, it's like the same thing that you would be doing as like a data analyst.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think sorry, just to add on a little bit, like there is some flexibility in that. I think a lot of us, we do a lot of data cleaning day to day, so it's Python. Some people like to use R instead. That's totally fine too. And then I think we end up using also Stata. I've seen some like SAS, but that's definitely a little bit getting phased out. And then also there's like numerical things that happen in like MATLAB and other things down the line. So we can kind of dig into any of those if you have specific questions too.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I just want to make sure am I the only student? I mean, I am only the person who is asking the question.
No.
Oh.
Kevin is one of our PhD students. Lydia is one of our PhD students, and Pratik is one of our PhD students, and I'm the graduate coordinator for the program.
Oh, okay, thank you. I know. Yeah. Oh, so in the application part, do we need to articulate very clearly what kind of research field I am interested in?
No, I think there's a good amount of like flexibility in that. So I came in wanting to do stuff that was at the intersection of finance and technology, and I'm pretty far away from that. So I think it's a good idea to have a couple of different areas that you're potentially interested in and kind of highlight how the experiences that you have could kind of be helpful in those areas. But I don't think you need to have a very, very solid idea that I'm going to work on this and you're really tied down to that. I really don't think that's the case at all.
Okay. So according to your suggestion, I need to show a broad interest of mine, right? Regarding finance.
I think it's great if you can say that I'm specifically interested in credit intermediation, or so like effectively banking, or I'm interested in how technology impacts finance. I think it's good if you can give like specific areas that you're interested in, but I don't think it's neither a requirement, something that you're going to be like held to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the more you dig into it, like you can read about topics in the news, or more read topics like from journals, like finance academic journals. I think the more that you dig into it and the more specific it is, I think my sense is that it's slightly better to do so. But you also, again, don't have to be tied to that specific topic. You can always change topics, and it's definitely not a big deal.
Yeah.
But just the more time you spend like exploring their questions and kind of articulating something that you're interested in, but also like you can also just show, like, demonstrate the passions that you have for like why you're interested in these things. I think those are also helpful.
Mhm. Mm. Thank you.
I wanted to add, we've got about 8 minutes left. And so if anybody has any kind of ending questions, we can, kind of end it right at 5:30 or early, or however you guys want to do it. I'm just kind of moderating.
I have one question about the admission process. The final deadline of the application is 15 December, am I right? And
Yes, but yeah, December 15th.
December 15, but there is a they're saying that you can still apply till February.
So we're hoping to get the bulk of our applicants by December 15th, and we're hoping to find some really, really strong applicants at the December deadline. But if we don't, I mean, we typically have cohorts that are about 3 to 4 students each year, and we're looking to fill 3 to 4 spots for the fall 2023 year. But if for some reason we only get 2 really strong candidates that we want to take on that have applied by December 15th, we'll still continue looking at applications until February 15th. So in theory, there's no real guarantee that you'll still be considered after December 15th, but don't count it out either.
Thank you.
I have a question. What are some pointers that will make somebody stand out as a really strong candidate in the application process?
I think one thing that people don't realize is that having strong letters of recommendation really makes a huge difference. On top of your personal statement with, talk about your research interests and your passion and everything. And I think one of the students mentioned, we do look at people holistically, and it isn't just a high GPA or a really high GRE. They are looking for they're looking for well-rounded students. But definitely the letters of interest, or the letters of recommendation rather, those make a huge difference, I think.
Awesome, thank you.
So how many research field in total regarding our financial PhD program here? For example, for the economics department, we have a macro, micro, and econometrics, labor economics, such kind of research direction. So can you, give me a general introduction about the finance research direction?
Let me try a relatively simple answer. So typically we divide the subjects into corporate finance and asset pricing. So corporate finance is more on the company side. How do you make capital structure decisions? How much debt versus equity and things like that. And asset pricing is more of a study of securities market, asset prices, stock returns and stuff like that. And so these two fields are relatively separate, even though there's a lot of sort of topics on the intersection between corporate finance and asset pricing. And a lot of the research actually is done sort of on the intersection. But just in terms of like coursework and what you would do in like the second year, for example, in our finance PhD sequence, your courses will be divided between corporate finance versus asset pricing, and then empirical versus theory. So there's like basically 4 major components, which is also what you'll be tested on for the qualification exam.
Yeah. Cool. So, oh, go ahead. Thank you.
Or yeah, just to pile on to that, I think there's 2 points I would add is that I think that split between corporate finance and asset pricing is relatively standard for a lot of PhD programs. And so kind of the core PhD classes in finance programs across the country generally, is my understanding, is pretty split between asset pricing and corporate finance. On top of that, people will build out their interests outside of that. I think one of the real strengths of our program that we've spoken a little bit about is that our faculty are really strong and quite broad. And so you can support almost any types of research interests. So for example, I'm interested in banking, which is kind of in the middle of both, like Lydia was saying, and there's multiple faculty members here that I can speak to and bounce different ideas off of. And they all are coming from different perspectives and have different ideas and help guide me in different ways. And so I think in general, like the field can be split into a lot of different ways, but those are the pillars that, as Lydia was saying.
Yeah. So you mentioned you are researching the corporate finance direction, right?
Yeah, I'm still quite broad. I think we kind of carve out like financial intermediation, and it kind of sits in the middle of like there's some asset pricing implications where it's like, oh, what kind of firms bear risk, and in that way it's a little bit more asset pricing, but then also there's like different decisions about like asymmetric information and things like that end up also impacting the corporate finance side. So I think it's a good example of like a big topic that ends up spanning both. Earlier we talked about also macro finance that again doesn't fall cleanly into one or the other, but it's definitely something that multiple people in the faculty do also. And so there's a lot of different topics like that kind of build out from the program.
Interesting. Thank you.
I have one last question, if you consider. It's a technical question. If the deadline is 15 December and this semester will be ended by 13 or 14 December, I guess, this fall semester. What if I apply by 15 December and can I update my transcript letter 15 December?
Yeah, you can, when you apply directly to the graduate school itself, not necessarily to the Department of Finance. And so they're the ones that collect all of your supporting documentation, and then they give us a package that you have submitted. And so as you need to update transcripts by semester, they will happily accept those and then send them
So
to us.
I have to send the through email my transcript.
They only accept official transcripts, but I think you can send those digitally, especially here, since I know you mentioned you were at Texas State. It should be a really quick turnaround in terms of sending them to UT here.
Thank you. This is my last question. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, it's 5:30, and if there are no more questions, we can go ahead and end this. Thank you to my PhD students for volunteering for this for us, and all of you guys that joined us. We definitely would like to see you apply to the program, and hopefully we can see you in the fall. You get admitted. And my information, you can just look me up on the UT website, Robin Lynch. I'm the graduate coordinator, and I do answer all of the administrative questions. You can send it to my email directly or the Finn PhD email. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
You too.
Great evening.